All right, this is Unit 8, Formative 1, Video 3, Factoring Trinomials by Grouping, and there will be some GCFs. All right, so our first trinomial, we always need to make sure to see if there's a GCF. So I have 10, 26, and 56. So they do have a common factor, so I'm going to go ahead and eliminate the common factor. So I'm going to factor out a 2. Okay. So now I have 2, and then I have 5x squared minus 13x minus 28. Okay. Now make sure this 2 stays. Even when you're done, you need to make sure that's in your answer. Okay. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and start the factoring by changing the trinomial into 4 terms. So remember, we do that with a chart, where I have my A times C, and I need to find those that add up to B. So you might, this is where it's sort of up to you. I'm going to go ahead and start with 1. So I know when I take my A times my C, I get negative 140. And my B term is negative 13. Okay. So we're going to start listing factors. Some of you guys can start at different spots. I'll just go ahead and start at negative 1 times 140. When I add those, I get 139. Okay. Now that is far off, so you can jump here, but I'm just going to go ahead and keep it. So negative 2 times 70 is negative 140, and that gives me 68 when I add. Negative 3 won't go into it. Negative 4 will 35 times, and when I add those, I get 31, getting closer. Negative 5 will go into 28 times, which when I add those gives me 23. All right, so 6 won't go, 7 will. So 7 will go in 20 times, which gives me 13. But remember, I want a negative 13, so I'm just going to switch my signs. So I'm going to go 7 and then change that to negative 20. And when I add those, I get a negative 13. So those are going to be my 2 terms. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to rewrite my trinomial. Okay. And then from here, we have to do what we did in video 2, and we're going to regroup. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to group the first 2 together, and I'm going to group the second 2 together. Now, make sure the sign is in between your parentheses, and since that's a negative, I need to make sure I change both of those. So the 20 is now a positive, and then my 28, my negative 28 is now a positive 28. Now we're going to find what each have in common. So on my first group here, okay, the first group here, I know they have an x in common. Okay, so I'm going to write my 2. So I'm going to factor out an x, and that gives me 5x plus 7. Okay. Now my second group here, my second set of parentheses, okay, I have a 28 and a 20. So what do they have in common? 4. Okay. So I'm going to factor out the 4. Now make sure you remember to bring down that sign. And then I get 4 will go into 25 times. That's an x. And then 28 divided by 4 is 7. Okay. All right. Now, if you look, remember, these should always be the same. 5x plus 7, 5x plus 7. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and write our answer. And don't forget the 2. Oops. And it doesn't matter what you do here, but I'm going to go ahead and take the 2 terms that were factored out, and I'm going to group them together. So there's an x minus 4. Okay. And then my other set of parentheses is the ones they share, and that will be my answer for that one. All right, so here's a second problem. We need to check for GCF. I don't see any numbers they have in common, but I do notice that we have a leading negative, which means we have to factor a negative out. So I'm going to factor a -1 out since they don't have anything else in common. And then remember, when you factor a negative, it just changes the signs of all the terms. All right, now I'm going to start my table. So I'm going to have A times C, and we want to know which ones of those add up to B. So my A times C is 1 times -8, which is -8, and my B term is -2. Okay. So again, -1 and 8, that gives me a 7. -2 and 4 gives me a 2. Okay. But I want a -2, so I need to flip my sign. So I'm going to have a 2 and a -4. That'll give me my -2. So I'm going to rewrite my trinomial into 4 terms. Okay. So basically, I am replacing this with this, okay? And they add up to the same thing, okay? All right, now we need to regroup. So I'm going to group my first 2 terms together, and I'm going to group my second 2. Now I did factor out this negative, so I need to make sure I change the sign of the 8. Okay. All right, so now we need to figure, got my -1 there. So we're going to look at the first group together. So this x squared plus 2x, they have an x in common. So I'm going to factor an x out. That leaves me x plus 2. I'm going to bring down my minus, and then these have a 4 in common, which will be -4, and then it'll be x plus 2. Okay? So a couple things hopefully you've noticed by now is the numbers inside the parentheses should be the same, or the binomials inside the parentheses should be the same. That is these here, x plus 2, x plus 2. That'll always happen. Okay, so now I'm going to write my answer. So I have -1. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and take what I factored out, the x and the -4, and group those together. Okay, and then my other set of parentheses is what they share, which is the x plus 2. And then this would be my answer.